All right, let's get into our next discussion now. On July the 11th, President Muhammadu Buhari wrote the National Assembly requesting it to set aside the sum of 242 billion naira as funds for prosecuting the 2019 election.
According to the president, out of the proposed amount, 164 billion naira should be appropriated for the National Assembly through environment, while the balance of 78 billion naira would be provided for in the 2019 budget. And President Buhari urged the Senate to quickly act on his request to enable the nation's electoral agency, the INEC, and security agencies kickstart early preparations.
The 164 billion was for INEC, actually. But the Senate failed to act on the president's request before it abruptly adjourned sitting until September. Now, INEC is now raising the alarm that it might be starved of funds and might have to consider other sources of funding at the elections if the National Assembly fails to appropriate funds. Now, Chairman of the Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption, Professor Ite Sage, says the attempt by the Senate to starve INEC of funds to prosecute election constitutes high treason.
Well, meanwhile, different reactions have been trailing the proposed sum for financing the elections. While some Nigerians say the amount is proposed amount is too much, others say economic realities and the current security situation of the country warrants such. Well, let's find out what our guest has to say about all of this. He's joining us. He's a presidential aspirant for 2019. He's a former deputy governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Kingsley Moghalu. Good morning. It's good to have you on the show.
Good morning. You're welcome.
Good to be here.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you.
All right. I wonder how troubling this is for you, to know that the funds for INEC to prosecute the 2019 elections, which you hope to be fully involved in, are not ready. And on the other hand, we have heard from the INEC chairman himself, Mahmoud Yakub, that 2019 election will be the best so far.
Well, it's very troubling, definitely, to see this type of situation, because it means that such a constitutionally fundamental process as democratic elections is being politicized. And I think the problem with Nigeria's politicians is that for them politics is everything. Leadership is absent. So that's why you see we have so many politicians in Nigeria but no leaders. And that's why I've put myself forward as a leader to really take over the helm and work with Nigerians to transform this country. The current crop of people, if you watch their behavior at every step of the way, you will see that the national interest is never what is uppermost in their mind. So how do we get to do elections when there is no money for INEC to perform its constitutional role? So it's very deplorable that the National Assembly should treat this request in this manner. That's for sure. Also, though, the question of the sums are staggering.
Yeah, 242 billion.
The sums are staggering. And the question really does legitimately arise. Why? Why is this amount of money being voted to conduct elections? Do we really, in 36 states of the Federation, do you really need 260-something billion naira to conduct a sensible election? I think half of that sum could more than do the job. But this is Nigeria, as far as the bad guy will say. see how we're living now, So I was dancing with him recently.
Oh, that's great.
You have to check that out in social media.
All right.
But, so the problem is just a failure of leadership. But we must have the elections.
All right.
And they must be financed.
Let's even go to the question you were just asking.
Yes.
If you check the amount that was used for election, 2015 was not up to 100 billion.
Yes.
And then jumping to a whopping 242 billion.
Yeah.
Let us even assume, okay, the money will be used. But why is it so expensive to run an election in Nigeria?
It is expensive because, first of all, let's just understand one basic factor, and that is that political processes, democratic processes, are expensive everywhere in the world.
Yes.
But they're expensive mainly for the candidates, not as expensive for the organizers of the elections, but they still have to spend some money to guarantee security, to guarantee the safety of integrity of the electoral process, the ballot boxes, to print the ballot papers. I used to be in the central bank, and the central bank is involved. They use the security printing and minting company to print the ballot papers.
Yes.
And, you know, so it's, but in Nigeria, the money that politics takes in Nigeria is insane. It is absolute insanity. And that's because just the values of the society have absolutely collapsed. And politics itself is nothing more than a quest for power for its own sake. Therefore, in a country like this that is a failing state, essentially, politicians want power at all costs because that is what guarantees their comfort, that is what guarantees patronage, and that's why they spend and spend. Once they get into office, their immediate priority is to recoup the money they spent.
All right. Earlier guest actually said it was an investment that, you know, you have to recoup your, well, dividends, if you like.
Yeah.
Now, is it now a reality that has dawned on INEC that it needs to begin to think outside of the box as far as funding of INEC is concerned? Is it time for us to even begin to actually remove the funding of INEC from government?
I think so. I think that
place.
is something we should begin to think about, to make the process a little bit more independent. We have to now begin to look at alternative ways to fund elections in Nigeria. You know,
what are those likely alternative ways?
Well, there could be an electoral trust fund that is set up so that it's not really a budgetary process all the time. It's a trust fund that is set up with, and that makes investments that are independent, and the money is managed outside of INEC itself, and outside of the government, and outside of the Senate. This is one way to go about it. In the current situation, if the money comes to them too late, they may have to borrow. They may have no option.
All right, let's look into you specifically now.
Thank you.
You mentioned earlier that the values amongst Nigerians have even collapsed in the first place. And that is part of the reason why they need so much money. In the same environment and the same space that you are running for president.
Yes.
So, in that space where there is no value, how do you intend?
How do you navigate?
Exactly. How do you intend to navigate? That's a good word. How do you intend to navigate that same space that has no value?
Yes, absolutely. You do this through political education. The laws say that, you know, we shouldn't spend more than 1 billion naira for presidential elections.
Ideally.
200 million naira for governorships. 40 million naira for Senate, 20 for House of Reps, and so on. So what we are trying to do is to use political education to talk to our citizens about the price of your vote and why it's important not to sell your vote, because that's another reason why elections are very expensive and getting more expensive in Nigeria. There is now a shift away from rigging the election by snatching ballot boxes or stuffing them towards simply just buying the votes. And that requires a lot of money. That is the weaponization of poverty. This is what our politicians are doing. They've made Nigerians poor so that they can use the poverty of our people to entrench themselves in office. So when I go around in my town halls around the country, what I'm saying to Nigerians is this: how much is your future worth? If a politician comes and gives you 5,000 naira and buys your vote, 4 years later, does your son have a job? Does your daughter have a job? Most probably they still don't. So is it worth it to take 5,000 and eat it in one day? Or is it better for you to think a little bit beyond your immediate need? But you know, it's a very difficult decision because poverty really rewires the brain. And this is what our politicians are using to their advantage. But political education, I have said that I am in politics essentially as a liberation struggle for the Nigerian people. So political education is important. And as you educate people politically, you do find, I find, the reaction to my campaign or my sensitization campaign so far is that people are beginning to understand that we need something different, something new, something bold in
But
this
what
country.
exactly is the extent of that political awareness,
Yes.
apart from vote buying?
Yes.
You know, I mean, people talk a lot about don't sell your vote and all
Yeah.
of that, but there's a whole lot more when it
Yes.
comes to
Absolutely.
educating the electorate.
Yes, we educate
I
them.
mean, at the time we are now, we're talking
Exactly.
about defections, you know, and what of you, the absence of ideology
Yes,
and all of that.
absolutely.
How do you now get to the average Nigerian to
Yes.
understand that this is what you look out for
Yes.
in that candidate?
Yes, let me explain how I talk to the Nigerian people. I tell them the importance of the 3 C's: competence, character, capacity, and then track record. I relate these 3 C's to their reality. Look at the state of electricity in this country after the last 20 years of civilian rule. Look at the state of the economy. Look at the poverty. We are now the poverty capital of the world. And I ask the citizens, do you deserve to be poor? And then I also make reference to other countries, because Nigerians like to be in touch with what's happening in the world. So you tell them about Dubai. You tell them about Malaysia. You tell them about China.
Singapore.
Yes, Singapore. And so you say to them, look at these countries, how they've progressed over the last 50 years from being a place that was equal with Nigeria at independence, some further behind.
Yes.
And today, they're great countries that we all visit. Look at what took them there: leadership. So when you vote, if you want Nigeria to be like Dubai, if you want Nigeria to be like Singapore, you should be looking towards these kinds of people. People like myself, without meaning to be immodest, because we have a vision for what Nigeria should become. And we are seeking office in order to transform this country. So you must distinguish between people like us and people who have been in power over these past 20 years, who have delivered you only poverty. And then you must attack the shibboleths of ethnic identity, religious barriers. You must attack, retrograde political customs like zoning. You must explain to them, like I was in Mina, Niger State, and somebody raised the question of zoning. And I asked him, what are the problems of Nigeria? Poverty, unemployment, insecurity. Are any of these problems zoned? Everybody started laughing. I said, well, they're not zoned. They're everywhere in Nigeria. Why would you zone the solution? The man started scratching his head. I said, no. Do you care where your medical doctor comes from?
No.
You should be looking for who will solve your problem. This is how you break through. You have to hit them at a spot where illumination comes. And that's a matter of communication and the ability to communicate.
Well, let's hope they're getting really enlightened as you educate.
It's a process. It's not one
exactly.
event.
Because the point there is, it seemed like when it comes to the issue of zoning, like you mentioned, the mind of the Nigerian by default has shifted everything. All the major political parties are feeling it is a time for a certain region. So by default, their minds have, set towards that side.
Exactly. And so we're explaining to them that is just arrant nonsense.
Okay. There was a meeting. You held a meeting with some other young contestants recently. Sometime.
Yes, absolutely.
Would you let us know, because Nigerians are, a chunk of Nigerians feel, it's the time of relatively younger people, fresh, and all of that. But there is still the issue of the clash of, these young people, each person has his own strength. How will they come together, and all of that, so they don't share the votes and so on. Would you want to share with us what you agreed at the meeting?
That was the discussion. That we should really, it's called Presidential Aspirants Coming Together, PACT. And the whole idea was to understand that we have a common objective. And that objective is about Nigeria. It's not about ourselves or our personal ambitions. Therefore, it is more practical, if possible, for us to eventually come together with maybe one consensus candidate. So that discussion is what is going on. So first of all, we came to an agreement that we all share the same values and we're all in this for the same reason. How can we all work together? Now, how that will happen practically is still a process that's being developed. It could be different candidates continuing to build up their own strength. and at a certain point come
Converge.
together. Yes, or
Okay.
it could happen earlier. It doesn't really matter. But
All right.
I am hopeful that this will happen. That is my hope.
All right, I hope we can explore more on that. But let's
Yeah.
come to this issue of funding for the 2019
Yes.
general election. That's what's on the table now. It is evident that the President Buhari, in laying out the 2018 budget, did not factor in funding of INEC. And
Yes.
now there's talk about environment,
Yes.
you know, and all of that, which has raised a lot of dust.
Yes.
What does that say to you? And
It tells me,
yeah.
again, the incompetence of this government. That's what it reaffirms to me. They're always reactive. They're always last minute. They're always ad hoc. You have to plan. Governance is about planning and transparency. You see what I'm saying? And about accountability. So you have to understand as a government that you need capacity to think about all the possible roles of the government and make provision for them well in time. But everything in Nigeria is just ad hoc, last minute. And, you know, we're just, you know, stumbling from one, you know, thing to the other. And that's why life in this country is just not what it ought to be. We need people leading Nigeria who have a vision, who have a worldview of transformation, and use strategy, who have a worldview of transformation, and use strategy as a tool of governance. Use performance management as a tool of governance. Use risk management as a tool of governance. Use human capacity building as a tool of governance. When I become president in 2019, the most important offices in the presidency will be these 4 offices. There will be a national office of strategy, or an office of national strategy.
Okay.
There will be a national office of risk management. There will be the office of performance management, and there will be the office of human capital development. These 4 offices, they'll be manned by technocrats. A politician will not come near a 100-mile radius of any of these offices. No, that's the truth. Because you want results. You don't want speeches or long stories or people looking for money to chop. No, that's not what we're here to do. We are looking for an opportunity to transform this country, life for the average Nigerian.
So what strategy then would you recommend,
Yes.
you know, so that the 2019 election is not
Elections.
jeopardized
Yes.
with this whole funding problem?
Well, it's late for long-term strategies. There will have now to be short-term solutions, alternative solutions such as we've discussed. If the INEC doesn't get the money, they'll have to go and find it somehow. They could borrow it, and then through the budgeting process, it could be refunded. You know, this is one thing that could be explored.
Okay.
But I'm just talking about going forward when, hopefully, I come to office as president. The way we will pursue these kinds of things, we will have a very holistic look at the whole country and what needs to be done. And there will be a grand strategy to govern Nigeria, not just for the immediate, but to set Nigeria on the path to becoming another Dubai, another Malaysia, another China in 20 years or
If
or
not
15
better.
years. If not better,
Okay.
actually. And that's called, what they call it is the big, hairy, audacious goal, BHAG. That's what we call it in strategy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. At independence, Nigeria was known for agriculture.
Yes.
In fact, that was why we have the green and the green, white, green, which represents agriculture.
Yeah.
At a point, oil came, took over, and all of that. But it seemed agriculture seemed to be resonating in the minds, hidden somewhere
Yeah.
behind
Yeah.
that agriculture is still the sector that would take Nigeria somewhere.
To the promised land.
To the promised land. And now every government comes and promises agriculture, food security, food this, food that, imported, and all of that. What strategy will you have in that regard? Because agriculture still remains the sector that has the largest employment
Yes,
of
absolutely. Agriculture is a very important sector. But what has happened in Nigeria over the last 50 years is that we got into the worship of the god of small things, oil. And that's what has ruined this country's economy. When you worship the god of small things, you know, and not the god of big things. I worship the god of big things. I am a visionary and I am a practical leader, you know. So a leader must have a vision. Then you must have the ability to inspire. Then you must have the ability to motivate the people. And then you must have the ability to take calculated risks that are well managed. Now, coming to agriculture,
Yes.
the problem with agriculture in this country is that our leaders don't understand the potential role of agriculture in economic transformation. They focus a lot on subsistence agriculture, which keeps our economy backward. Agriculture should be part of a strategy of innovation and industrialization, which are the things that will drive the economy when I become president in 2019. So, for example, if you're looking at agriculture, you must look at the value chain. There is cultivation, there is transportation of agricultural produce, there is storage, then there is processing, then there should be export. These are the 5 parts of the value chain. So you have to make strategic investments in each of these parts of the value chain for agriculture to really become an industry, not just a subsistence. And that's the problem, because the very definition of economic transformation is an economy that moves away from relying largely on agriculture, especially subsistence agriculture and or export of raw agricultural products, towards value-added complex products.
Now there is a threat to that agriculture vision that you have. The security situation.
Absolutely.
That is
absolutely
tearing apart
the country
Nigeria's very food basket, talking about Benue and the rest of them.
Absolutely.
So if you're going to fix agric, it means you must fix security. How do you think you're going to be able to deliver on that?
Let me tell you what I'll do.
Do you even know what is at the root of the security threats?
What is at the root of the security threat in Nigeria is the absence of political will on the part of this government to address the security threat. Because this government is an extremely parochial government. So their first interest is to satisfy a parochial interest. It is not the larger national interest. So, for example, some people are threatening the security of this state, this country, and they're being handled with kid gloves. There's only a response when the political outcry becomes too much, and you see that response is very reluctant. It's like pulling teeth. You understand what I'm saying? I'm talking about the herdsmen.
Yes.
So the first thing I would do as president of Nigeria, first of all, by the way, we have seen that the hood does not make the monk. We elected a retired general in the belief that that will secure Nigeria. As we have seen, insecurity has increased in the last 3 years. So first, I will have the political will. Second, I will appoint a security team on the basis of professionalism, not parochialism. Third, we would have an intellectual and sophisticated understanding of the various dimensions of national security. National security is not just Boko Haram. It's Boko Haram, it's herdsmen, it's kidnapping, it's cyber security, the security of our computer networks. It is the very fact that 87 million people in this country live in extreme poverty, and that this is rising, and that almost 20 million people are unemployed, and that our population is rising. At the same time, this trajectory is a national security threat that is very fundamental.
Time up, we're being told. Unfortunately, we're not able to explore your thoughts on restructuring
on security.
and all of,
that's right.
and all of
but
that.
Let me also say that just to wrap up,
that
a very important part of my security reform is the recruitment, equipment, and training, which we will do, of 1.5 million new policemen and women in this country. We need a real police force.
Will there be funds to pay all of that?
There will. If you know how Nigeria's funds are wasted in frivolities, and 80% of our budget is going to paying civil servants.
You were in the CBN,
of course.
so you certainly stand a very good place to tell us that.
I know how we're going to finance a new police force.
Professor Kingsley Moghalu, thank you so much for coming. I know that as we get along, though, but time for us to get your mind concerning other areas and aspects of this country in Nigeria.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good to be here.